Good afternoon, early good evening. Thank you all for being at our third Jobs Forum panel this semester. We're very fortunate to have three panelists that I all know personally because they're all USC graduates. I think all but one took classes with me. Amy, I don't think you took a class with me, but I certainly worked with you for a couple years, or several years, I should say. So we're really fortunate. The goal for tonight is to talk about sort of a younger person's perspective of getting involved in politics. In other words, up till now, we've heard from our directors who have had these fabulous political careers, but by no means would we suggest they're fairly new to the field of politics. And then our second Jobs Forum were our three fellows who are all very well versed in terms of being involved in politics. The focus of tonight's panel are people who have been out in the neighborhood of 4, 5, or 6 years since graduating college. And for you all to get a sense of what it's really like to get out into that field and to get a job in, to start your careers. So before we do introductions on my end and start our conversation, let me go through a couple of announcements for both traditional 395 as well as research. First, for traditional 395, hopefully you students are well aware that this Friday is your outline and annotated bibliography. That is going to be uploaded on Blackboard by 5 p.m. Please make sure to upload it as a Word doc so that I can put comments on it and get it back to you. In terms of both traditional and research groups, your first political event is in, your second political event is not due until the end of the semester, but that's only a few weeks away. So you have until November 13th at 5 p.m. to submit that along with your final paper and a few other things that we've already talked about. And then professionalization workshops. This is the really the third of 4 panels. You do, whether you're traditional or research 395 students, you do have to do 2 of these workshops. Know that tonight counts, of course. Make sure that you have RSVP'd by registering for this event. And we have one more event on November 10th, which is going to be on crisis communications. We have Heather Wilson from STDK Knickerbocker, who's going to be joining us. And even if you've done your 2 panels, but you're interested in that topic, you're certainly welcome to come to that as well. Okay, in terms of how tonight's format's going to run, I'm going to start with some brief introductions of our 3 panelists. And from there, I'm going to moderate the panel for approximately 30 minutes or so. At the half hour, we're going to break out. Each of you has been identified and will be broken out into a room. We're going to have about 6 students in each room, along with 1 panelist in each room. And this is an opportunity to simply have a conversation with someone who has actually graduated, gotten a job, has gainful employment, has to pay taxes, has to deal with all the headaches in life of being an employee. And it is meant and designed to be casual. So no pressure for people to ask questions. We certainly want and encourage you to do that. And we'll have myself as well as the other center staff members, one in each room, to help sort of make sure that orchestrates correctly. After those 15 minutes, we'll all come back together for about 10 minutes of Q&A for any questions that if you maybe didn't get placed in the room and you had a question for one of their panelists, you'll have an opportunity to ask that question at the end of the hour. And then we'll be done at 5 o'clock. So with no further ado, let me introduce Leesa Dancick. She is an account executive at Elevate Public Affairs. Elevate is a public affairs firm here in Los Angeles. Or are you only in Sacramento, Leesa?
We have LA as well as Sacramento and San Francisco. Oh,
look at that. Okay, very good. She's been there for a couple years, and we'll be hearing about her journey to how she got there to where she's at today. Second, Amy Gebert. Oh, and by the way, Leesa took my poli-sci 426 class, and she told me earlier just how great that class was, so I couldn't agree more. Amy Gebert, who was a former student worker at the Unruh Institute several years ago now. My gosh, 6 years ago, Amy, if you can believe that. She works with LA City Councilmember Joe Buscaino as a communications director. So we'll hear what that world is all about. And last but not least, another one of my former students, Daniel Lopez, a Democratic strategist with LAT Strategies, and we'll find out what LAT Strategies does. Daniel does a lot of different things, different campaigns and whatnot. So very diverse background from everybody on our panel. So let's start our conversation as I always do. And I'll start with you, Leesa, if that's okay. Can you give the class a sense of your personal journey? You know, what did you do when you were coming out of SC? What were you thinking of the path you were going to take, and how that path sort of took you to where you're at today?
Definitely, and very excited to be here. And I have to give a special shout out to one of our Elevate interns, Jade, is on this Zoom as well. So super excited. But yeah, my background with USC. So I graduated in May 2016, which, as you all remember, was another fun time where we had a presidential election. And I knew that it was a great opportunity to get involved on campaigns. Wasn't quite necessarily sure that campaigns were what I wanted to do long-term in politics, but can't say no to that kind of opportunity. And went and worked for a state party in the North LA area as a volunteer coordinator for 4 different races, all in North LA. And just about most of what I learned in politics and campaigns came from that time. And like many campaign staff who are young, I went up to Sacramento, and that was a great opportunity to work in the state assembly, because you really get to use your experience working on a campaign and messaging and kind of an audience-minded approach to a lot of what you do, and start using that to mix with policy. And so after being in the state legislature as a staffer for about a year and a half, came back down to the LA area and ran a campaign in my home assembly district, which is a lot of fun. And similarly was able to really hone those campaign skills again. And from there, wanted to get more experience with communications rather than policy, and sought out working for a public affairs firm. And I was connected to Elevate, which we're an all-female firm right now. And that was really important for me to have a female mentor in that space. And that's how I got to Elevate.
Wonderful. Amy, how about you? What was your path? What was your journey?
All right, I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. My name's Amy, and I, again, work for Los Angeles City Councilmember Joe Buscaino. So I think my path actually started before I graduated. I did a ton of different internships, mostly through the Unruh Institute, everything from political consulting to I was way back on the campaign for mayor with Wendy Gruhl versus now current Mayor Eric Garcetti. I worked for nonprofits. I worked up at the Sacramento Bee. And so because I really, in college, didn't quite have an idea of the fields I wanted to go in. So kind of taking all these experiences, you know, I was able to kind of see what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do, and definitely what I enjoyed. And post-graduation, my last internship that I had my spring semester of my senior year, it was with a political consulting firm, and they ended up hiring me on. And I was there about a year and a half when this opportunity came up in the council member's office, and I've been here ever since. I just had my 5-year anniversary last month, which doesn't seem real. It seems like crazy that much time has passed. But yeah, and now I'm doing communications for the council member, and I also work on some of our technology related motions that are going through committee currently. One's almost done. I'm really excited. And so, yeah, so I kind of also am a jack of all trades. What's great about council offices is they're small teams. So you get a lot of experience. You know, you're not as siloed. You know, I'm hopping into policy meetings. I do comms, again, like working kind of on these technology related motions on moving our city into the 21st century, hopefully. One day, that's our goal. You know, that really got to use kind of all my combined internship experiences, and what I like kind of from each internship I get to do here in a council office, and it's something I really enjoy.
Great, wonderful. I can't believe it's been 5 years. Oh my goodness.
Crazy.
Time flies, right? Daniel, how about you? What's the path you've taken so far?
Well, if you think 5 years is long, I'll take you back to the halcyon days of 2008 is when I got started in politics. I was a freshman at USC. I remember me and my classmate, Micah Scheinlin, who's actually, we're still really good friends, that we met together at USC. He's now the political director at CMA. We met interning on Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign, and that's how that all started. I got involved as an intern on a campaign, on Hillary's campaign, because my mom said, go get a job. I said, I'm going to go work on a presidential campaign. as an intern, and she's like, that's not what I meant, but she loved Hillary. And so I loved doing that as my first exposure to campaigns. I thought they were the West Wing. I found out they were not, and they are very different. You need to work hard and have very long hours, very short sleep at the beginning. But I had a great experience, got to staff President Clinton in North Carolina, got to staff the now Secretary of State in North Carolina, Texas, and California. Those are the 3 states I was in, all while I was 19. I was extremely lucky. After that, went to go work for Mayor Virgosa, and then worked on his re-election campaign, worked on a city council campaign for Paul Krikorian, and then I was hired onto the campaign or onto his city staff when we won in 2010. I was a junior at USC, so I was doing 40 hours at school and also a full load at USC. Graduated in 2011. I know I'm so old. And worked in Paul's office for another 4 years while I ran campaigns on the side. Took some time off to run some like city council campaigns. Our chief of staff ran for assembly at Dream Nazarian and was elected, so I did that, but went back to Paul's, was his transportation director. And then in 2015, I got a call that changed my life. Barb Boxer had just retired. One of my mentors, Ace Smith, who was a consultant on Hillary's campaign and Antonio's campaign, and said, you know, I was talking with Kamala Harris, and we're looking for some new staff on her campaign. Would love for you to sit down with her. I'm like, awesome. Sat down with Kamala. I got the job. I was her political director on her Senate campaign in 2016. Had so much fun on that. And then 2018, I remember right after the election in 2016, I got a message, a text message from an unknown number. It says, hi, Daniel, would love to connect. Give me let's figure out a way to connect when you have a chance. I was like, who is this? And it's like, Gavin. I'm like, Gavin who? And he's like, Gavin Newsom. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. There's no way that that's actually the truth. And he's like, no, it's actually me. And he sent me a selfie of himself. And I felt like a idiot. And so I was lucky enough to convince him to hire me as his political director. Did that for the 2018 cycle. And then after that, after 2 statewide back to back, I was a little tired. And so what I decided is to open up my own firm, focus on a couple races. So I'm working on a bunch of races right now. I'm doing the No on 22 campaign, which is the Uber and Lyft one, which is the most expensive ballot measure in California history. And then a couple of state assembly races and other races. But that's a little bit about me. I have a little bit of experience everywhere, comms, policy, obviously the pickle sphere and campaigns. So love to get into whatever you guys want to discuss.
Sure. Well, let me start with a question to Amy and Leesa. When you think back to your graduating sort of time frame, I wonder, and you know, it's interesting. I actually don't know the answer to this question, but I think it would be interesting to know. Did either of you, and we'll start with Amy, did either of you use any resources from USC in order to sort of kickstart your job push? Because, you know, we always think, well, I'm going to go to SCY. Well, yes, it's a strong academic institution. We get that, but it's also about the SC family and it's networking, and we're going to get that perfect job. Amy, did SC really help in that regard, or do you think it was more Amy Gebert initiative that got it done?
I think it was all the Unruh Institute, because again, like I had been
that almost sounds like a loaded question. Oh my God.
Because I was a student worker there for pretty much my whole career at SC. So I was, you know, we were setting up panels and we had all these panelists. I sat on a number of panels. So it was just constantly meeting people. And again, like all those internship experiences, I think built my personal network. And then those references, because people knew me, even from internships I had done years ago, like when I came to the council office, you know, they were asking around about me, and people who knew me through the Unruh Institute were able to give good recommendations because they had seen the work I had done, even though that was years ago. And, you know, I think that helped propel, and then you're just kind of in like this world is very small. And once you kind of know a couple of people, you know, you're always, you know, one or two connections away from knowing someone. Like, for example, Micah, when I was interning up in Sacramento at the Sacramento Bee, I like knew no one. And he had a car and I didn't have a car. And so he was connecting me to like networking events while we were up there. And so it was just nice to know, you know, you had that one USC connection. And that was pretty much the only connection I had, you know, whether it was, you know, asking someone random, you know, like, I don't even know how do you get from the airport, you know, to the apartment that I was renting for 2 months over summer, you know. So it's just all of those little connections, I think, in terms of like launching a job search really helped, because, you know, and I still do this to this day. If I, you know, other council staff send out a note saying, oh, you know, we're hiring for this position or this position, I would forward it to whoever my contact is at the UNRO Institute. And I actually know someone who's working in another council office. So that's how their comms deputy got hired, is I had forwarded them the notice. They saw it and they sent people to interview. Yeah. So I think that's kind of how that is, just taking advantage of this opportunity and all the opportunities that, you know, USC, it takes your own initiative, but the opportunities are there, and kind of to build that larger network.
Right. Leesa, how about you? Did you, now this, you know, this is going to be neutral based, because you did not work at the UNRO Institute, so we're not self-promoting, but what resources, if any, did USC help with in regard? And by the way, it may be none. And I think a lot of students need to understand that SC is not just going to be there with a silver platter handing you a job, but I think there certainly are opportunities.
Definitely. And I would say, you know, those opportunities are very much there, but looking back, they were much more indirect for me. I would definitely piggyback similar to what Amy was saying about being on panels and connecting to folks at USC, where being on panels with the UNRO Institute and learning how to formulate what my thoughts were and getting, you know, speedy questions on a panel was really helpful for me as I went out and was searching for the right opportunity. But also, kind of funny, what I was telling you a little bit before we started the panel, Professor Auerbach, is that in one of my classes with Dan Schnurr, we had Mike Madrid, who's also worked a lot with USC and who is now, both Dan and Mike are some of my mentors. And what Mike had presented to me in a class with Dan Schnurr and about campaigns, I went up and spoke to him afterwards. And he was impressed enough with my initiative to chat with him that he had reached out to who would actually end up being my boss and said, hey, but met this girl, Leesa. She said she applied to work with you. I think she's really great. And that, who was then later my boss, said, yeah, I'm actually going to hire her. So it's funny you say that. So it wasn't necessarily so directly as it was necessarily for Amy, but I would say it was more indirect, those skills. And to also echo what Amy said, it's the networking that makes a huge difference. Even after graduation, the USC name, particularly in Sacramento, where there is a public policy campus for USC, you know, everyone is aware of what USC students and the USC alum are capable of, and just being able to make those connections, whether they're for jobs or they're for, you know, broader networking, and you don't know how it will help you later on.
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, networking sure does have a significant impact once you can figure out where that network is, I guess, right? Sort of get plugged in. Daniel, you've chosen a little different path in the sense that you're working on campaigns. To me, it almost seems to me, and I've never worked in that environment, but it's almost like you don't necessarily know where your next job is going to be, in a sense, when you're working from campaign to campaign, right? It's got to be stressful for you. Now, you've had a lot of success early on, but what advice would you give to someone who's thinking, yeah, campaigns is something I want to do. They want to be sort of where you're at with the opportunity to help run or coordinate different campaigns in the future. What sort of advice would you give for someone who wants to sort of follow that path?
So I would always say, look, there's two ways to work your way up the political pyramid, right? It's a couple ways. You can either try to work within government and you like link up with a elected official, or if you want to run for office, eventually build your experience that way. I worked in government for 5 years. I loved it and I hated it. I loved it because it was super flexible for the time, or not super flexible. It was super comforting when I was at a point beginning my career where I didn't have to worry about the next job or stuff like that. But there becomes a moment where you start to top out. And if you really want to test your mettle and test your skills and be able to rise in a very quick way, campaigns are your best way to do that. I think the best staffers, whether they're in government or in campaigns, are the ones that have worked on campaigns, because we live in a political system. Like running the campaigns is in every single aspect of politics. And so I felt that the best way for me to jump a lot higher was to work on campaigns, because if you work on a campaign and you elect that person, you're in the driver's seat for a major role in that person's administration, instead of trying to figure out when slots open up. So I think if you really want it, for me, I've always thought of it as campaigns are a young man's game, or young person's game. You are willing, if you're willing to move around, if you don't have the same commitments where you can pretty much all you have to do is provide for yourself, then you can learn so much on these campaigns, because the way you perceive things, the way you try to do things, the way you try to go through and problematize, you can learn so many different options by talking to so many different leaders, bosses, and elected officials. And I think that's the really important thing, is to be learning and to constantly open your mind to different forms of thought. And so that's why I've learned through campaigns. It's made me a better staffer. I think it's made me a better human also. But I think that's what I would say is, if you really want to test yourself and you have the ability to, go work on campaigns when you're young. And then you can, like, as you settle down, you can go work in government or different things.
Right. Good.
Can I piggyback real quickly on that,
Sure, of
Professor
course.
Auerbach? And I would just kind of echo and even go further to say, you don't necessarily need, for instance, a master's degree, though certainly go get one if that's what you want to do, or any other post-grad, but the skills that you do learn on campaign about how to talk to someone who has the opposite opinion of you or for the person you're working for and wants to be very, conflict oriented, but the ability to have a calm conversation with someone who disagrees with you, or to work extremely focused on those campaigns and go, as far as you could possibly test yourself, like Daniel was saying, are skills that other policymakers, other campaigns, companies all recognize. And so just having that under your belt sends off a certain signal that you have those skills.
Let me ask you, Leesa, would you have done anything differently in terms of looking at where your career path has taken you? Would you have made different choices?
That's a great question. And, of course, you think all the time, I should have studied abroad, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. And I don't think so. I think everything I did, I had so much fun, whether it was campaigns or working in the state assembly, learned so much. I definitely think there are points now where I'd say, I do want to, eventually pursue a postgraduate degree. Should I have studied abroad and taken those skills that I would have learned abroad, but also the fun of going abroad before, going off into the adult world? So to that extent, yes, but in terms of the specific decisions, certainly not.
Amy, how about you? Anything you would have done differently to get to where you're at? Or do you think that you sort of the process you followed was pretty tried and true?
Yeah, no, I in general try not to look back or have any regrets kind of about kind of the path I've taken, but I think, I've really appreciated every single opportunity I have, whether that was on a campaign or, working for a nonprofit. I think all of those skills build, and you use those skills no matter what position you move to. So yeah, I don't think there isn't anything I would have done differently. I did luckily get a study abroad. I had never been out of the country before. I did that. And so that is something I would recommend because it's just interesting to see a different government system and to be in kind of a different world. And I'm a news junkie. So it was fun to follow, different news, different races. The year I was in the UK was also an election year, and just to see how they did elections was so different and so fascinating. And it's definitely, I really appreciate that perspective I had. So that's something I'd encourage if you get the opportunity.
Yeah. Daniel, how about one nugget of advice for our students in terms of something you wish that, something now that you wish you'd known when you were, just coming out of college? Anything that sort of rings true in your mind?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's one is don't be discouraged by what you see as a potential, like if you feel like you're running in place, don't be discouraged about that because opportunities hop up whenever. But I also think don't be complacent. I think that's the biggest thing that I would say is like you have to constantly be growing, constantly be hungry. It's like I think that's what separates truly good staffers from great, or very good politicians from being great. It's that hunger that consumes you. You want to move, like there's something that constantly wants you to, like, either you want to provide good public policy, or you want to deliver for your clients or stuff like that, or you want to run perfect campaign. It's about a hunger that has to consume you. So I would say it's constantly, don't be complacent. Don't accept that like this is like my standard. Always keep pushing, because I think once you start pushing, then as life gets further along, as people start having kids and family, like the risks that you would be willing to take, you won't be able to. And that kind of leads into the third thing is be willing to take a risk. I think the biggest thing that separates me from some of my colleagues is my willingness to take risks. And I think, that's the difference, is like you have to be willing to risk, to take bigger, to take shots, to test yourself, to go outside your comfort zone. And I think that's the key to being better holistically.
Great, good. Wonderful words of advice. It is 4:30, so we're going to go ahead out, if it's all right with Thomas, who's coordinating this.
Yes,
Thomas,
I'm ready when you are.
Good. We're going to go ahead and go out into our breakout rooms. For anyone who came in a few minutes late, we have already selected 6 students per partner to break out. It is an opportunity just for you to ask specific questions of the partner that you're placed in. We'll be in the breakout for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes left for Q&A. So Thomas, go ahead and send us off to our rooms, and we'll continue on our discussion. Looks like we're repopulating. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you found the breakout session to be a useful experience. And we've got about, 6 or 7 minutes left. So I'd like to use that time simply to do a little Q&A between our students and our 3 panelists. If you were had a question for one of the panelists that you didn't have a chance to ask while you were in your breakout, or you weren't with that panelist in a breakout, now's the time. So if you want to go ahead and just raise your virtual hand, I guess might be the easiest way to do that. Let me know, and then I'll call on you for a question. So who might have a question for our panelists? Come on, brave soul. I'm sure you're out there somewhere.
I do have a question for Leesa, if she's willing to. I'm sorry, is that how you pronounce your name?
Leesa, yeah, just like normal.
Okay, awesome. You said that you work for a company that is all female driven, or is it you guys all have female employees only?
So, and I apologize in advance because there's a leaf blower outside my apartment right now, but if you can hear me all right. So
yeah, we can.
Elevate is female owned, a woman owned small business. And right now it is all female on our team. We have had men both as interns and as regular, account executives and as staff. But right now it is all female, and it's a great experience, especially coming from, worlds or industries that might not necessarily be the case. But to learn from, female mentors who, of course, would have had similar experiences as me, coming up early in my career has been really helpful for me. But did you have a particular follow-up question for it?
Yeah, actually, because in my experience, because I've worked with the government since I was like 17, and I've never really had a female mentor. And when I did have people who, were in the higher ups and they were female, they were just very hard and cold. And I think that growing up in like government, I having a female mentor would have been amazing. But what do you think would be like the benefits of having a female mentor as a female yourself?
That's a good question. And well, Amy and I are now your female mentors, so who have worked in government. So there you go, there's two. But, you know, on top of that, I think, you know, I'm so sorry about this, Leesa. There are women who are, you know, a generation or two older than us, came up in a very different time than we have. And what they had to do to be able to play in any industry that's male dominated was different than, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we've got it.
Okay, sorry. Was very different than, you know, what we're able to do more so. And I think by having female mentors that are, you know, closer to me in age or in their careers has been able to show me or give me more confidence to be straightforward, whether it's with clients or with other public affairs staff or within my own firm, and not necessarily question myself, which I think is a very natural habit for women early in their careers to do.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that you make a good point in that a lot of the older females did kind of work in an environment where they did have to be sort of tough as nails. So I think you're right. It probably could benefit to have a female mentor who's a bit closer in age. Well, thank you for answering that.
Great.
Yeah, of course. Great question.
I think we have time for about one more question before we're up against the hours. So anyone else have a question for our panelists? Okay, good. I have one question then, but it is related to what was just brought up in terms of mentors, whether it's male or female. Amy, I wonder if you could give a little insight about how one finds a mentor, and I'll ask the same thing to Daniel. How does one go about finding mentors, giving people that can give you advice or guidance in this process?
So I think one is finding someone who you connect to or who you admire, you know, not just, you know, some random person, like, you know, especially if it's somebody you've met. And then I think just following up and staying in touch is really important, even if you've had, you know, even if you've only met once, and, you know, if they're willing to engage with you back, then you start building that relationship. You know, right now it's COVID, so we, you know, maybe like a, you know, a Zoom coffee date, like, you know, just an informational kind of interview, get to know you. That can be just really helpful in building, you know, I'm here at City Hall, like I like monthly host like a coffee run, where I'm just like, you know, we're all busy, we all have a lot of time, we literally just walk together to a coffee shop and come back, and just kind of building that connection and kind of, you know, just hanging out with people and getting to see where people are at. I think that then can build into, you know, a greater relationship where you're able, you know, then to ask for advice on different things, etc. You know, so I would just kind of try to make it natural and kind of see who are those people who you really want to connect with and build those relationships with, because then those, hopefully not only are you going to have, you know, not just mentor, but those friendships and those working relationships, you're going to have your whole career. And you're going to be able to go to these people at any point where you're at and be able to ask questions or get advice about your next steps or what you're currently doing.
Great. Daniel, where did you find your mentors? How did you find them?
Well, I think it was, you know, you start first with people that invest in you, bosses, folks that, like, a lot of my mentors came from places like USC, you know, fellow alums. I'd like to, like Leesa said, I will be your guys' mentor. I'll put my contact information in the chat, or if folks want to reach out to the Unruh folks. I'm always down to, you know, obviously talk, text, email, whatever. You know, I think it's, especially during this pandemic, people realize how lonely people can be. And it's sometimes just about reaching out and talking through the stuff that everyone deals with on a daily basis. And so for me, I was lucky. I've had folks that have invested in me, you know, obviously being Latino. It's really important that for me and like my mentors is to try to lift up Latino voices, because there's not a lot of them that have the same last name as me or similar last names. And so I try to go out of my way to do that as much as I can. But you know, obviously, you know, on all my campaigns, I've tried to make sure we've had a very strong contingent of USC students as interns or staffers or stuff like that. So I can bring along the next generation. Kamala Harris once said to me, she's like, you know what? You might be the first person through that door, but you best damn well hope and make sure you aren't the last one through that door.
Wow, great
And-
words of wisdom.
And I try to follow that through my life.
Thanks to all of the panelists. Thanks to the center staff for helping put this together. We hope you found it useful. And for those of you that need one more event, keep in mind November 10th, crisis communication. We might very well be in a crisis that time. Hopefully not, but we'll see where we're at. And we will go from there. Thank you all. Appreciate it.